A homeless mother with twin girls discovers she inherited her billionaire grandmother's mansion, but the family had secretly sold everything. Then the lawyer declares they forgot the secret clause, and everything changes. Emma Carter pulled her worn-out coat tighter around her body as she watched her daughters sleeping under the public library steps. Sophie and Emily, with their identical blonde hair and angelic faces, deserved so much more than this. More than a piece of cardboard as a bed. More than cobbled-together leftovers for meals. More than a mother who could barely keep her eyes open after 16 hours of work. "Just one more night," she whispered to herself, adjusting the thin blanket over the girls. The irony didn't escape her. At 39, Emma Carter was sleeping in alleys and temporary shelters with her 4-year-old twins, when she had grown up in a mansion with 17 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. The space under the external staircase of the public library offered reasonable protection from the rain and wind. Emma always chose the most discreet spots, where the police rarely came by yet close enough to streetlights. Safety and invisibility, an unstable balance for anyone living on the streets. She leaned against the brick wall, trying to find a less uncomfortable position. Her body ached from the day's work. That morning, she had cleaned 3 different houses, then spent the afternoon handing out promotional flyers, followed by 4 hours waiting tables at a cheap diner in the evening. The girls stayed in a community daycare or, if there was no space, with Mrs. Peterson, an elderly woman who charged almost nothing to watch them for a few hours. Her prepaid cell phone, already dying, showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Emma ignored it, probably another debt collector. Bills piled up even without having a roof over their heads. Basic health insurance for the girls, a nearly maxed-out credit card she used only for emergencies, and fees at the shelter where they spent the coldest nights. She closed her eyes for a moment and let herself remember the house she grew up in, the smell of Egyptian cotton sheets, the shine of imported marble floors, the sound of water trickling in the garden fountain. The memory brought others, the chilly silence at the dining table, the disapproving looks, the razor-sharp words her mother threw at her as if they were daggers. "You'll never be like us, Emma. All this rebelliousness just proves you don't deserve the last name you carry." One of the twins stirred in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Emma knew without looking. Emily always talked in her sleep, while Sophie slept like a rock, small details only a mother would know. The rain started then, first with a few timid drops, then a downpour that dripped off the edge of the stairs. Emma adjusted the makeshift plastic tarp she had spread above them, creating a thin barrier against the dampness. Their backpacks, containing all their belongings, served as pillows. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. A security guard from the library approached on his night patrol. "Ma'am, you can't stay here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Emma felt her face burn with shame as she nodded. She was used to being kicked out of places, but it never stopped being humiliating. Just until the rain stops, she tried to negotiate, forcing a smile. "The girls are asleep." The man stared at her for a few seconds, his gaze shifting between her and the children. Something in his eyes softened. "I have to check the back of the building. I'll be back in about 40 minutes, he said, stepping away. A small kindness that made Emma swallow hard to hold back tears. 40 minutes of peace. 40 minutes of shelter. As the rain drummed on the ground around them, she took out her battered purse and counted her earnings for the day. $32 in tips plus her cleaning pay. It would barely cover food for the week, never mind other needs. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she opened the damp little notebook where she kept her finances. The numbers never balanced, no matter how many hours she worked. Each cent she earned already had a destination before it ever reached her. The next day, they'd need to go to the women's shelter. With rain predicted all week, sleeping on the street wasn't an option. She hated shelters. The noise, the lack of privacy, the pitying looks, but at least they'd get a hot shower. Life hadn't always been like this. There was a time Emma had a decent apartment, a stable job as an assistant manager at an art gallery, but then came the unplanned twins, and their father disappeared the moment he found out she was pregnant. Soon after, the gallery closed due to the economic downturn, a perfect storm that left her without solid ground. She tried several jobs, but none paid enough to cover rent and daycare. Every month pushed her further into debt, until an eviction and multiple failed attempts to find a new place led her to the streets. In her backpack, in an inner pocket, she kept a letter, her last resort. A plea for help to the family who had disowned her 15 years ago. Written and rewritten dozens of times, but never sent. Pride still spoke louder than desperation. Her grandmother Catherine had been on her mind a lot lately, the one person in the family who never looked at her with constant disappointment. She remembered Sunday afternoons in the mansion's library, when her grandmother showed off her art collections and told stories of traveling the world. "You have something special, Emma," Catherine would say, her eyes keen. "Something money can't buy." Emma never understood what her grandmother saw in her. Whatever that special quality was, it certainly didn't help pay the bills or provide a decent home for her children. She checked her cheap wristwatch. She still had 20 minutes before the guard returned. Closing her eyes, she tried to enjoy the brief moment of rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was busy planning the next day. Drop the girls at daycare by 7. Rush to the Martins' house to clean, then to Gino's restaurant, where she'd managed to pick up a few extra hours. Quick footsteps on the sidewalk made her open her eyes. A young couple ran past, escaping the rain, laughing together, carefree. Emma watched them go, so wrapped up in their own bubble of happiness, they didn't notice the woman and 2 kids huddled under the stairs. What would it be like to have that sense of security again? To wake up without the crushing uncertainty of where to sleep or what to eat. One of the girls coughed in her sleep, a small sound that echoed loudly in Emma's heart. For them, she would keep fighting. For them, she would swallow her pride if need be. Tomorrow would be another day. Maybe better, maybe the same, maybe worse. Emma no longer expected miracles, just enough resilience to keep going. To watch her daughters grow, to one day, who knows, give them more than mere survival. 40 minutes passed far too quickly. Emma gathered what little they had as she saw the guard returning in the distance. It was time to find another corner, another temporary shelter for the night. She gently woke the girls, their faces confused by yet another middle-of-the-night move. One more night at rock bottom, dreaming of a surface that seemed ever more distant. Morning arrived mercilessly and damp after a night of steady rain. Emma woke with a jolt as the first ray of sunlight cut between the buildings and hit her face. Her muscles protested as she sat up, having slept in a cramped position to shield the girls from the wet ground. Sophie and Emily were still asleep, curled into each other as they always did, sharing warmth. Emma checked the small cracked watch on her wrist, a dumpster find from a jewelry store's trash, 6:15. Soon the streets would get busier, and they'd have to leave the alcove before someone made them move. "Sophie, Emily, time to wake up," she whispered, gently touching the girls' tangled hair. The twins grumbled in unison, but soon opened their eyes. They were used to the routine of early wake-ups and quick departures. "It's wet here, Mummy," Sophie complained, always the more observant. "Today, we'll go to the community center. They have hot soup this morning," Emma promised. "Then maybe we can sit in the public library for a while, so Mommy can look for work." The promise of a hot meal and a dry spot was enough to perk them up. Emma helped them use the makeshift bathroom, a discreet spot behind a dumpster, and then washed their faces with water she kept in an old bottle. From the one large jaw-tattered backpack they owned, she took out a broken hairbrush to tidy the girls up at least a little. As they walked along the damp sidewalk toward the community center that served breakfast to people experiencing homelessness, Emma mentally rehearsed her plan for the day. She needed to stop by the distribution point for diapers and hygiene products, then try to find a quick job at the market, helping people carry groceries, and maybe secure a safe place for the girls while she attempted to wash dishes at the restaurant that occasionally hired her by the day. She was so absorbed in her survival calculations that she almost didn't notice the man standing at the center's entrance, repeatedly checking a piece of paper in his hand and glancing around as though looking for someone. Tall, wearing a well-tailored grey suit and polished shoes that clashed with the simple surroundings. The man spotted Emma approaching with her 2 daughters. His eyes settled on her a moment too long. "Emma Carter?" he asked, taking a step toward her. Instinctively, Emma pulled the girls closer, her body tensing. Years on the street had sharpened her protective instincts. "Who wants to know?" she replied cautiously. Life on the streets had taught her to distrust well-dressed strangers who knew her name. He could be a social worker, an undercover police officer, or a city official wanting them gone. "Michael Harris, from Harris and Associates," he said, offering a business card before continuing, as though not expecting her to take it. "I'm the lawyer in charge of Catherine Whitmore's estate. I've been trying to reach you for days." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Hearing her grandmother's name, which she hadn't heard spoken aloud in so long, sounded strange and distant. "My daughters need to eat," she answered coolly, ignoring the extended card. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I understand your situation, Miss Carter, but—" "Miss Carter," she corrected automatically, pulling her daughters along. "Miss Carter," he agreed with a nod. "I'm here on behalf of your grandmother. Catherine Whitmore passed away 10 days ago." Emma froze, the words striking like an unexpected blow. Outwardly, her face remained a mask carved from the years of hardship. Inside, however, a storm of conflicting emotions raged. Her grandmother, the only one in the family who had ever shown her any measure of kindness, even if distant, dead, without Emma even knowing she'd been sick. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, because it was the polite thing to say, not because she truly felt it. How could she mourn someone who'd barely been a part of her life? "Mommy, I'm hungry," Emily whined, tugging her hand and shattering the moment. "We need to talk about the will," Harris insisted, now eyeing the children in their worn-out clothes and pale faces. "It's really important, Ms. Carter." Emma almost laughed. "The will? Of course. Some legal formality demanded by the family, most likely requiring her signature renouncing any rights she might have. As if she actually had any rights. "Look, Mr. Harris, I don't know who sent you or why, but I was kicked out of the Whitmore family 15 years ago. Disowned, forgotten, erased from the family tree. Whatever you want me to sign, keep it. I have more pressing matters." The lawyer straightened his tie, clearly uncomfortable in this environment. "Ms. Carter, I didn't come to ask for a renunciation. Quite the opposite. Your grandmother left explicit instructions in her will. The Whitmore mansion and a sizable portion of the estate were left to you." The world seemed to freeze for a moment. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. "Is this some sort of sick joke?" she finally asked in a low voice, so the girls wouldn't hear her distress. "Not at all. I have all the documents right here. We can talk after your daughters have breakfast. It really is important." Emma looked at her curious girls and then at the impeccably dressed lawyer. Something didn't make sense. Her family hated her. Her mother had made it clear Emma wouldn't see a cent of Whitmore money, and her grandmother, though occasionally kind, had never openly defended Emma or offered help when she'd needed it most. "They eat first," she finally relented. "Then we talk." "Make it quick." Harris nodded, relieved, and waited while Emma took the girls into the community center. The place was simple but welcoming, with long tables where those experiencing homelessness received a free breakfast. Emma helped her daughters sit down and lined up to pick up 3 trays. "Who's the man in the suit, Mommy?" Sophie asked, ever observant, as she nibbled a piece of bread. "Someone who knew Grandma Catherine," Emma replied vaguely. The girls knew so little about her family that the name probably meant nothing to them. "We have a grandma." Emily's eyes went wide in surprise. Emma felt a pang of guilt. The girls had never met any family member, neither on their father's side, a boyfriend who vanished at the news of the pregnancy, nor on Emma's side, who had completely rejected her. "We did," she corrected gently. But she lived very far away. After the girls finished eating, Emma approached one of the volunteers, Jerry, an older man who always greeted the twins with a warm smile. "Jerry, could you keep an eye on them for a few minutes? I need to sort something out outside." "Of course, Emma. They can help me organize some children's book donations that came in." With the girls occupied, Emma walked out to find Harris, who waited patiently outdoors, scrolling through his expensive phone. "We have 15 minutes, she announced. "Talk." Harris glanced around, uneasy. "Could we go to my car?" "For privacy." Emma hesitated, her survival instinct screaming against getting into a vehicle with a stranger, but something about his professional demeanor and the fact they were right in front of a busy community center made her agree. In the luxurious Audi parked a few steps away, Harris opened his briefcase and spread some documents on the center console. Catherine Whitmore passed away peacefully in her sleep, he began in a professional tone Emma imagined he used with every client. In her final years, she made several changes to her will, the most significant one about 18 months ago. This last version is absolutely clear. The Whitmore mansion and 1/3 of her investments are left to you, Emma Carter. Emma looked at the papers without truly seeing them. That makes no sense, she murmured. She never contacted me. Never offered help when we were on the street. Harris adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable. I'm afraid there are complications to the story. Mrs. Whitmore confided in me that she tried to reach out many times over the years. I never got any message. Emma shook her head, incredulous. And it's not like it's hard to find me. I'm literally on the streets. She suspected interference from the family. Harris took a small envelope out of the folder. She left this for you to be given along with the will. With trembling fingers, Emma took the envelope. Her grandmother's elegant handwriting brought a flood of memories, childhood birthday cards, small notes left with gifts. My dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means I've left this world without managing what I wanted most, to hug you one last time and meet my great-granddaughters. I tried to find you for years, but your mother and uncles always assured me you wanted no contact, that you were fine and preferred to keep your distance from the family. Only recently did I discover the lies. I hope the mansion, now legally yours, will give you and the girls the comfort and security you deserve. I know money won't erase past hurts, but perhaps it can help build a better future. With eternal love, Grandma Catherine Emma folded the letter slowly, a single tear escaping down her face, etched by years of hardship. How much? She asked finally. Pardon? The amount? How much did she leave? Harris checked the documents. Besides the mansion, valued at about $4.8 million, there are investments totaling approximately $2.3 million. Emma let out a dry, almost hysterical laugh. You realize how absurd this is, right? A cruel cosmic joke. I've spent the last 3 years sleeping in alleys and doorways, begging for food, collecting cans to buy diapers. Now you're telling me I'm a millionaire? There is a complication, Harris cut in, his tone cautious. Your family contested the will immediately after it was read, and in addition, they sold the mansion. They sold it? Emma's eyes widened. How can they sell something they don't own? They did it before the reading of the will, claiming they had authorization, but your grandmother foresaw this possibility. There's a specific clause requiring your consent for any sale of the property, under any circumstance. Emma sank back in the leather seat, stunned by the news. I want to see the house, she declared suddenly. Today? Harris seemed surprised. Well, we can schedule... No, today, now. Emma straightened, determined. I need to be back to pick up my girls in an hour. Until then, I want to see the mansion with my own eyes. The lawyer hesitated a moment, then nodded. I can take you right now. And your daughters, Emma thought quickly. They'll stay with Jerry at the center. It's one of the few places I trust. Emma never imagined she'd return to the wealthy neighborhood where she grew up, riding in the back seat of such an expensive car. Harris's Audi slid quietly through the tree-lined streets of Westbrook Hills. The contrast between this world and hers, now so stark it felt surreal. As they drew closer to the property, Emma's heart pounded. 15 years. 15 long years since she had left those gates, vowing never to return, carrying only an old backpack and a fierce determination to prove her worth away from Whitmore money. When Harris stopped in front of the imposing iron gates, Emma couldn't hold back a sigh. The mansion rose in the distance, as majestic as she remembered, with white columns at the entrance, tall windows, and the vines her grandmother loved covering part of the side facade. The new owners haven't moved in yet, she asked, confused at seeing no sign of occupancy. As I mentioned, there are legal complications. Although the sale went through, it can't be finalized without your consent. The buyers are waiting for resolution before moving in. Harris typed a code into the electronic panel, and the gates opened slowly. Mrs. Whitmore gave me access for periodic inspections. I still have authorization to enter. Emma barely heard him. She was lost in the memories triggered by the long driveway. There on the right were the swings where she spent countless hours as a child. Further ahead, the centuries-old oak tree where her father taught her how to climb, before alcohol turned him into a bitter shell of the man he once was. Harris parked in the circular driveway at the front entrance. Emma stayed in the car for a moment, gathering her courage. "If you need a moment, I can wait," the lawyer offered, surprising her with his gentleness. "No, let's just get this over with." Climbing the front steps felt like a time warp. Each step brought forth memories, some good, most bitter. The echo of the key turning in the lock resonated in the silence, and as the door opened, Emma smelled the familiar scent of polished wood and expensive cleaning products always used in the mansion. The entrance hall was exactly as she remembered, with the Italian marble floor, the massive crystal chandelier, and the sweeping staircase leading to the second floor. But the place was empty. No antique furniture, no valuable paintings, no Persian rugs her grandmother prized. "Where's the furniture?" she asked, her voice echoing in the bare space. "Your family sold it off separately," Harris explained. "Some items went to auction, others were sold privately." Anger bubbled up inside Emma. Not for the loss of the items, but for the disrespect to her grandmother's memory. For such blatant greed. She walked through the hall into the living room, her steps echoing. The enormous room, once filled with elegant sofas and antiques, was now empty, revealing marks on the floor where furniture had once stood. The only evidence it had ever been a home. "Sit up straight, Emma. A lady doesn't just flop onto the couch like that." Her mother's voice, cold and critical, seemed to echo off the bare walls. Emma could almost see her there, hair in a flawless bun, pearls around her neck, pointing out every fault, every imperfection. "You're a disgrace to the Whitmore name. You act like a savage." She moved on to the dining room, where the huge mahogany table that seated 20 people was nowhere to be seen. This was the space, now just a polished floor, that had witnessed the formal dinners she hated, the continuous etiquette lessons, the public scoldings whenever she failed to meet expectations. "Do us the kindness of not embarrassing the family in front of guests, Emma." The voice of Uncle Richard, always condescending. The same uncle who, according to Harris, was leading the effort to contest the will. The tour continued through the ghost mansion, each empty room stirring memories Emma had suppressed for years. The library, her favorite refuge, was now without its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, its rare volumes, or the leather armchair where Emma curled up for hours on end. Reaching the music studio, Emma paused in the doorway. There used to be a grand piano where her grandmother played Chopin on Sunday afternoons. It was where Emma had learned to play, showing a talent even her mother couldn't criticize. "They sold the piano too?" she asked, voice trembling. Harris consulted his notes. "I believe so. It was auctioned off along with most of the valuable items." Emma felt a genuine pang of sorrow. That piano meant more than a valuable object. It was one of the few places in that house she felt truly seen, where her talent was appreciated rather than scrutinized. On the second floor, she passed her parents' old bedroom, the guest room where Aunt Elaine stayed during the holidays. The suites rarely used except when the house hosted important guests. Finally, she reached her old room. The door was ajar, like an invitation. Emma hesitated, hand trembling slightly as she pushed it open. The space was as empty as the rest, yet different somehow. The walls, once covered with posters of bands her mother despised, were now bare. The large window still offered the same view of the backyard gardens, but the cushioned seat where she used to daydream was gone. "They really left nothing," she murmured, more to herself than to Harris, who stood respectfully at the door. She walked to the center of the room and closed her eyes. She could picture every detail. The canopy bed she found over the top but secretly adored, the bookshelf packed with titles her mother disapproved of, the desk where she wrote in her journal about her dreams of freedom. It was in this room she had cried night after night when she announced her pregnancy and was met with ultimatums instead of support. From this room she left for the last time, rejected, disinherited, but determined to survive without the Whitmore fortune. And now, ironically, it had all come back to her. You said they sold the house. Emma broke the silence, turning to Harris. To whom? A development company. They plan to demolish the mansion and build a luxury condominium. Emma felt like she'd been punched. Demolish, completely destroy the place where, despite everything, her past was rooted. When she learned about that, your grandmother made her most significant change to the will, Harris continued. The clause I mentioned. She knew your mother and uncles would try to sell the property immediately after her death. What exactly does the clause say? In simple terms, it states that any sale of the Whitmore mansion requires Emma Carter's explicit consent. Without that consent, any contract for sale is considered void. So how did they sell it without my consent? Harris straightened his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. Your mother claimed you had renounced all rights to the Whitmore estate when you left. She presented a document purportedly bearing your signature. It's forged, Emma declared immediately. I barely managed to sign documents for shelters and social services, let alone a legal renunciation. That's what we suspect. We've already requested a handwriting analysis. Emma walked over to the window, gazing at the gardens that had once been impeccably maintained and now showed signs of neglect. The swan fountain, once her grandmother's favorite use, was turned off, the water still and greenish. What happens now? She asked, not turning from the view. There's a preliminary hearing next week. If the analysis proves the signature is forged, the sale will be automatically nullified. The mansion and the assets will be yours as Catherine wished. And if I don't want it? Harris looked confused. Meaning? What if I don't want the mansion? If I'd prefer the money? Could I sell the property myself? Absolutely. Once your right is established, the property is yours to do with as you please. Emma nodded slowly, her mind churning with considerations. There was so much to think about. A roof over the girls' heads, decent food every day, schools, security. But there were also the weight of memories, the symbolism of returning to the place she'd been kicked out of. Your family will certainly fight, Harris cautioned. They're determined to keep you away from the Whitmore fortune. I never wanted their money, Emma said quietly, more to herself than to the lawyer. I just wanted to belong, to be accepted as I was. Catherine knew that, Harris replied gently. That's why she fought so hard to protect your share of the inheritance. Leaving the mansion, Emma felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. The news was so surreal, it felt like an elaborate dream, the kind she might have after a particularly rough night on the streets. In the car on the way back downtown, where she needed to pick up her daughters, Emma looked at her calloused hands, hardened by labor and the elements, hands that now, apparently, held the power over a fortune. There's one thing I need to know, she said to Harris when he pulled up outside the center. Why did my grandmother wait until she died to do this? Why not find me while she was alive, pull me off the streets? The lawyer turned off the engine, thoughtful. Mrs. Whitmore confided that she tried to locate you many times over the years, but your family kept saying you made it clear you wanted no contact, that you were doing well and didn't need them. Only in the past 2 years, when her health declined, did she hire a private investigator who discovered the truth. That I was on the streets with 2 kids, Emma said bitterly. Yes, that's when she made the most significant changes to her will. I believe she tried to reach out directly many times afterward. Emma remembered the strangers in nice clothes she'd avoided out of fear, the letters she never received because she had no fixed address, the times she'd run from officials, believing they were social workers there to take her daughters. I'm going to fight, she declared suddenly. Not for the money or the mansion itself, but because my girls deserve a home, food, a decent life, and because I won't let them get away with what they did. Harris nodded, a faint look of respect in his eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll be in touch tomorrow with the next steps. Do you have a phone number, or shall we meet here? I don't have a phone, Emma said, the reality of her situation starkly contrasting with talk of millions. I'll be here tomorrow morning at breakfast time. Emma stepped out of the car and walked into the center. Through the window, she saw Sophie and Emily on the floor, looking at worn-out children's books, clueless about the monumental turn their lives had just taken, as oblivious as they were to the daily struggles they faced. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. In just a few hours, she'd gone from homeless to possible millionaire, from rejected to heiress. It was truly unexpected news, so unexpected she still couldn't fully believe it. Could it be a trap, or was it, finally, the universe balancing the scales? 3 days after visiting the mansion, Emma waited with her daughters in the small cafe next to Harris's office. The lawyer had insisted on meeting there instead of the community center, and he had provided enough money for Emma to buy basic clothes for herself and the girls. "Appearances matter in court," he explained, and though Emma hated to admit it, she knew he was right. Sophie and Emily were fascinated by the chocolate cupcakes in front of them, an unheard-of treat. Emma watched their delighted expressions while sipping her coffee, trying to ignore the stares of other customers at their still simplistic attire. The door opened, and Harris rushed in, looking more tense than usual. "Sorry I'm late," he said, taking a seat. He glanced at the girls and offered a brief smile. "Hello, Sophie, Emily." The twins gazed at him curiously, then returned their attention to the cupcakes. "What happened?" Emma asked, noting the tension in his face. Harris took a deep breath. "Your family filed a formal challenge to the will. They claim Catherine was suffering from dementia in her final years and wasn't in her right mind when she made the changes." Emma closed her eyes for a moment. "Is that true?" "Absolutely not. Your grandmother underwent full neurological evaluations before each change to her will, precisely anticipating this kind of tactic. I have all the medical reports confirming her mental capacity." Emma nodded, relieved. "There's more," Harris went on. "The judge set a preliminary hearing for next week. Your presence is mandatory." "What about the girls?" "We can arrange for someone trustworthy to look after them during the hearing." Emma shook her head. "I don't leave my children with strangers." "I understand, we'll figure something out," Harris assured, making notes. "One more thing you should know. Your mother and your uncles requested a meeting with you before the hearing. They say they want to resolve this as a family." Emma gave a bitter laugh. "Family, now they remember we share blood. After leaving me on the streets for years." "You don't have to accept," Harris quickly added. "Legally, our case is solid." Emma looked at her daughters, absorbed in their own little world, oblivious to the impending battle. "What do you think I should do?" Harris hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Professionally, I'd say avoid any contact without me present. They might try to manipulate you or extract statements that hurt our case." He paused. "But personally, sometimes looking into the eyes of those who wronged us can give us the strength we need to move on." Emma considered his words. Part of her wanted to dodge these people who had rejected her. Another part craved a confrontation to show she had survived despite them. "I'll think about it," she finally replied. The conference room at the Benson and Wallace law firm looked exactly like Emma imagined a family attorney's office would. Dark wood paneling, expensive landscape paintings, and a conference table likely worth more than everything Emma had ever owned. Next to Harris, she waited, trying to steady her nerves. She'd decided to leave the twins at the community center with Jerry and his wife, people she trusted enough. The door opened, and Emma felt her stomach drop. Her mother, Susan Whitmore, walked in first, still elegant at 65D, with perfectly dyed blonde hair, pearls at her neck, and a spotless navy blue suit. Behind her came her uncles, Richard and Elaine, equally well dressed and wearing guarded expressions. For a moment, no one spoke. Susan looked at Emma as if seeing a ghost. "Emma," she said finally, voice controlled, "you look different." 15 years on the streets will do that to a person, Mother," Emma replied, surprised by her own calm. Richard cleared his throat, impatient. "Let's cut to the chase. We're here to discuss a reasonable settlement for everyone." "Reasonable," Emma repeated. "Like it was reasonable to throw your pregnant niece out of the house, or lie to my grandmother, telling her I wanted no contact." "We can't change the past," Elaine interrupted. She'd always been the most diplomatic. "We're here to talk about the future." The family's lawyer, a middle-aged man with a bored expression, placed a folder on the table. "Our proposal is simple. We're willing to offer Ms. Carter a furnished 2-bedroom apartment downtown and a monthly allowance of $3,000 for her children's expenses. Harris narrowed his eyes. In exchange for renouncing any right to the Whitmore mansion and the rest of the estate, the lawyer finished. A clean, final agreement. Emma felt a wave of anger surging through her. You really think you can buy my dignity so cheaply, after everything you did? Be sensible, Emma, said Susan, leaning forward. Think of your daughters. They deserve a stable home, quality education. Don't you dare mention my daughters, Emma replied, her voice dangerously low. Not when you haven't even asked their names. An awkward silence took over the room. Sophie and Emily, Susan said softly, surprising Emma. I know my granddaughters' names. Emma blinked, confused. How? Catherine showed me the photos the investigator took. They're beautiful. They look like you did at their age. There was something in Susan's voice that sounded different, almost genuine. Emma couldn't tell if she could trust it. Why are we wasting time on sentimentality? Richard broke in. The fact is, Emma can't manage a property of that size. She can barely take care of herself. That's enough, Richard, Susan cut him off, to everyone's surprise. Emma survived on the streets for years without our help. Don't underestimate her strength. Emma eyed her mother warily. What was going on? Was this some kind of tactic? We do not accept the proposal, Harris stated firmly. My client is entitled to the mansion and her share of the estate, as determined by Catherine Whitmore's valid will. Then we'll see you in court, Richard threatened, standing abruptly. Everyone prepared to leave, but Susan hesitated. Emma, I'd like to meet the girls. Maybe we could have coffee. Emma froze, caught off guard by the request. Why? Why now? Susan looked genuinely remorseful. Because I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes I can't undo. But maybe it's not too late to be a grandmother, even if I can never truly be a mother to you again. Emma studied her mother's face, searching for manipulation. She saw new lines that hadn't been there before, a tiredness in her eyes that seemed real. I'll think about it, she finally said, but I'm not promising anything. They're desperate, Harris said once they were alone. That offer proves it. Emma was still shaken by the meeting. My mother seemed different. Don't be fooled, Harris warned. People rarely change that drastically. You think it's just a trick to make me drop the inheritance claim? Or gain your trust and manipulate you later? Stay alert. Emma nodded, but something inside her still stirred at her mother's words about the girls. Could Susan truly want to meet her granddaughters, or was it all about the money? Sayastiundas in the small park near the community center, Emma watched Sophie and Emily playing on the swings, pushed by Jerry. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow that made the moment feel almost normal, like any family enjoying the day. Mom? Emma turned to see Susan standing a few yards away, holding a paper bag. She wore more casual clothes than usual, light pants and a loose blouse, as if trying not to stand out. What are you doing here? Emma asked, tense. How did you find me? Your lawyer mentioned you spend time at this center, Susan answered, taking a hesitant step forward. I brought something for the girls. Emma stayed silent, torn between telling her mother to leave and letting her stay. Are those them? Susan asked, glancing at the twins on the swings. Yes, they're identical. Sophie has a small birthmark behind her right ear. It's the only physical difference. Susan smiled slightly. You had a similar mark, you know. Not behind the ear, but on your shoulder. I know, Emma responded, surprised that her mother remembered such a detail. A long, uncomfortable silence followed. What did you bring? Emma finally asked, nodding at the bag. Susan handed it over. Just a few children's books. I remembered how much you loved them at their age. Emma opened the bag and found 3 classic picture books in new, colorful editions. Something tightened in her chest as she recognized stories her mother once read to her before everything changed. Why are you doing this, Mom? What do you really want? Susan took a deep breath. When your father died, something in me died as well. I hardened, became the cold person you knew in your teenage years. She paused. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Emma. I know what I did is unforgivable. Throwing my pregnant daughter out, lying to your grandmother. So what then? Are you trying to clear your conscience? I want to meet my granddaughters before I die, Susan said simply. And maybe, if you'll let me, show them that not every Whitmore is a monster. Emma studied her mother's face, searching for signs of deceit. She saw only an aging woman, seemingly sincere in her regret. But years on the street had taught Emma to be wary of appearances. I'll think about it, she said, placing the books back into the bag. But if this is some kind of trap to make me give up the inheritance— It's not, Susan assured her. Richard and Elaine only care about the money, but Her voice caught. I just want a chance to fix at least one of my mistakes. As Susan walked away, Emma remained still, watching her. Part of her wanted to believe in her mother's change, in a late-arriving remorse. Another, more guarded part, recalled all the manipulations she'd endured, the empty promises, the endless disapproval. Was it worth fighting for a home that had always made her feel unwanted? The question echoed in her mind as she returned her gaze to Sophie and Emily, laughing on the swings. For them, maybe it was worth it. Not for the mansion itself, not for the painful memories, but for the future she could build from the rubble of the past. If only she could trust her mother's intentions, if only she could be sure she wouldn't be hurt again. Emma clutched the bag of books to her chest and made a decision. She would remain cautious, but she wouldn't slam the door completely. The girls deserved to meet their grandmother, the real person, if such a person existed behind Susan Whitmore's mask. But Emma would keep her distance, armed with the streetwise lessons she'd learned over the years. She would never again be the naive girl who believed her family's empty promises. The county courthouse was an imposing grey stone building with white columns that made Emma feel small and insignificant. She held her daughter's hands firmly as they climbed the steps to the entrance. Harris waited at the top, holding his expensive leather briefcase and wearing a confident smile Emma wished she shared. "Ready?" he asked, eyeing her simple but neat second-hand dress, bought with money he'd advanced her. "No," Emma admitted, "but let's get it over with." Harris nodded and crouched to the twins' level. "Hello, Sophie and Emily." "Remember me?" The girls nodded shyly. Over the last few days, he had become a constant presence, always bringing small gifts and treating them kindly. "There's a special room for you while your mom's in the hearing," he explained. "It's got books and toys. What do you think?" Emily looked at Emma as uncertain. "Are you staying with us, Mommy?" "I can't, sweetie. I have to take care of something important, but I'll be really close. And as soon as it's done, I'll come get you, okay?" Sophie crossed her arms, wary. "Promise you'll come back." The question hit Emma hard. Of course the girls would fear separations. Their lives on the street had been defined by instability and the need to always stick together. "I promise with all my heart," Emma said, hugging them. "And I always keep my promises, don't I?" The twins nodded, slightly more at ease. A social worker named Marina arrived to take them, assuring Emma she'd take good care of the girls. Even so, watching them walk down the corridor, glancing back as if afraid she'd vanish, was difficult. "They'll be fine," Harris said, guiding Emma to the courtroom. "Now we have to focus. Your family has brought in reinforcements." Inside, Emma immediately spotted her mother and uncles sitting behind a table with not one but 3 expensive, experienced-looking lawyers. Susan gave Emma a discreet nod, her face unreadable. Judge Caldwell was a middle-aged man with a neutral expression that offered no hint of bias. After the formalities, the hearing began with the family's lead attorney, Mr. Bennett, presenting their case. "Your Honor, we have a delicate situation here," he began, his polished voice echoing in the room. "Mrs. Catherine Whitmore, sadly suffering cognitive decline in her final years, was manipulated into making drastic changes to her will, harming her own children in favor of a granddaughter she hadn't seen in over 15 years. Emma felt her blood boil at the blatant lie about her grandmother, but Harris gently placed a hand on her arm, reminding her to keep calm. "Moreover," Bennett continued, "even if we considered this problematic will valid, we must question whether Miss Carter has the capacity to manage a property of this magnitude. She has lived on the streets for years, with no steady employment, no formal education." "Objection," Harris interrupted, standing. "Counsel is making allegations about my client's capacity based on prejudice, not facts." Sustained, Judge Caldwell responded. Mr. Bennett, please stick to legal aspects. Bennett offered a falsely apologetic smile. Pardon me, Your Honor. We simply highlight legitimate doubts about Ms. Carter's capability to handle a property valued at nearly $5 million. Therefore, we request the court to reconsider validating the will or, at minimum, appoint an administrator. When it was Harris's turn, Emma felt grateful to have him by her side. He spoke with clarity and confidence she couldn't have mustered alone. Your Honor, the allegations from the opposing party are easily refuted by documentation. First, here are Mrs. Whitmore's medical reports, signed by respected neurologists. Harris handed a folder to the judge. As you can see, Catherine Whitmore was professionally evaluated before each significant change to her will and was always deemed fully competent. The judge looked over the papers with interest. Furthermore, Harris continued, Mrs. Whitmore left a personal letter explaining her intentions, which I'd like to present as evidence. Bennett rose quickly. Objection! A personal letter isn't legal evidence. I'm not presenting it as legally binding, but as clarification of the testator's intent, which is relevant to this case, Harris countered. I'll allow it, said Judge Caldwell. Proceed, Mr. Harris. Harris handed the judge a copy of Catherine's letter and began reading aloud. I am fully aware of the decisions I make in altering my will. My granddaughter Emma was unfairly treated by our family, and I wish to correct this wrong while I still can. I have followed her silent struggle over the years, and despite the difficulties she faced, she has shown a strength and dignity many with privileges never develop. I leave her not only my property, but my confidence in her ability to honor the Whitmore legacy in a way my own children have not. Emma felt tears welling up as she heard her grandmother's words. She never imagined Catherine felt such respect for her. As for Miss Carter's capacity, Harris continued, I would point out that surviving on the streets for years with 2 small children demonstrates precisely the resilience and resourcefulness needed to manage a property. Furthermore, my client graduated from high school before leaving home and displays notable intelligence and judgment. Harris presented a preliminary management plan for the property they had drafted, including hiring professionals for maintenance and accounting. The hearing lasted for hours, with accusations and defenses from both sides. The family produced witnesses who barely knew Emma, trying to paint her as irresponsible and unstable. Harris, in turn, offered written testimony from community center acquaintances, attesting to her character and her dedication to her daughters under the worst conditions. By the time the judge called a recess to deliberate, Emma felt exhausted. How do you think we're doing? She asked Harris as they headed to the room where the girls were waiting. Reasonably well, he answered, thoughtful. Judge Caldwell is known for fairness. Your grandmother's medical records are indisputable, and the personal letter made an impact. But your family is influential, and that always carries weight. Emma nodded, worried. What if they're right? She blurted. What if I really can't handle all this? Harris stopped in the hallway, looking at her seriously. Emma, these past few days, I've watched you study contracts, ask intelligent questions about property management, and meticulously plan for your daughter's future. I've met people born with every advantage who lack half your capability. His words offered her a moment of comfort, but her doubts lingered. As the girls played in the waiting area, excitedly recounting their new toys, Emma sat in a corner, lost in thought. Could she truly run a mansion, deal with bills, taxes, staff? More importantly, did she even want to return to a place full of painful memories? She closed her eyes briefly, and an unexpected memory surfaced. She was 8, and her grandmother Catherine had taken her to the mansion's garden, teaching her how to care for the roses she loved so much. See how delicate they are, Emma, Catherine had said, guiding her small fingers to touch a petal. But they're also strong. They survive winter, pests, storms, and then bloom even more beautifully. Emma remembered looking at her grandmother with a child's admiration. Like you, Grandma, Catherine had laughed, a pure, crystalline sound rarely heard in that household. No, dear, like you. That memory brought others. Catherine at the piano, teaching Emma her first notes. Catherine in the library, helping her reach the higher shelves. Catherine watching quietly during formal dinners, a slight smile of approval whenever Emma subtly defied her mother's strict etiquette rules. "You're different from the other Whitmores, Emma," Catherine had once said when they were alone in the library. "You have genuine compassion. You see people for who they are, not for what they have or can offer." Back then, Emma hadn't fully understood what her grandmother meant. Now, after years on the street meeting people of all backgrounds, witnessing cruelty as well as unexpected kindness, the words took on new meaning. "Mommy, look what I drew," Sophie ran up, showing a colourful picture. Emma looked at the drawing, a large house, very large, with 4 figures in front. 2 small, 1 medium, and 1 with white hair. "Who are they, sweetie?" "Me and Emily," Sophie explained, pointing to the small figures. "And you, and the grandma who went to heaven. We're at the big house the man in the suit talked about." Emma felt a lump in her throat. Even her daughters were dreaming of the mansion, of the stability they had never known. "It's a beautiful drawing, Sophie." "Are we going to live there, Mommy?" Emily asked, also joining them. Emma looked at her daughters, at their hopeful eyes, and made a choice. "If the judge allows it, yes. We'll turn it into the happiest house in the world." When the recess ended and everyone returned to the courtroom, Emma felt different. Her doubts hadn't vanished, but they were tempered by a resolve she hadn't felt in years. Judge Caldwell adjusted his glasses and surveyed the room before speaking. "After reviewing the evidence, this court finds no basis to invalidate Catherine Whitmore's will. The medical reports conclusively show she was of sound mind, and her intentions are clearly stated in both the legal document and personal correspondence." Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. Harris gently squeezed her arm in congratulations. "Regarding Ms. Carter's ability to manage the property," the judge continued, "I acknowledge the family's concerns. However, I see no concrete proof that Mrs. Carter is unable to handle her own assets." Richard Whitmore stood, face flushed with anger, but his lawyer held him back. "Therefore, the court rules that Emma Carter is the rightful heir to the Whitmore mansion, and 1/3 of Catherine Whitmore's assets, as stated in the will. The unauthorized sale of the property, lacking her consent, is null and void, and all demolition plans must be halted immediately." Susan Whitmore remained impassive, only her eyes betraying a mixture of emotions Emma couldn't fully decipher. "That said," the judge added, "I require Ms. Carter to submit a detailed management plan within 30 days and file quarterly financial reports with the court for the first year to ensure proper preservation of the estate." "That's perfectly reasonable, Your Honor," Harris agreed. While the final formalities were addressed, Emma stood silently processing what had just happened. She had won. The mansion was hers. The girl's future was secure, but she knew the real battle was just beginning. She'd have to prove herself not just to the court, but to herself. She'd have to face the ghosts of her past that haunted every room, and harder still, decide what kind of relationship, if any, she'd have with her family. Stepping out of the courthouse with Sophie and Emily skipping excitedly ahead, Emma saw her mother alone in the hallway. "Emma," Susan called, her voice lacking its usual edge. "May I speak with you for a minute?" "We have nothing left to discuss," Emma replied, walking on. "Please, it's about the mansion." Emma stopped, reluctant. "My girls need lunch." "Make it quick," Susan approached, keeping a respectful distance. "I know you have no reason to trust me," she began, "but I want you to know there are important documents in the mansion, old papers, family photos, things Catherine kept in her personal office. Why didn't you take them when you sold off the furniture?" Emma asked skeptically. Susan lowered her eyes. "Because they were yours. Childhood drawings, letters you wrote your grandmother from summer camp. Catherine kept them all in a special box. Richard wanted to throw them out, but I wouldn't let him." Emma studied her mother's face for signs of manipulation. "Why?" "Because you're still my daughter," Susan said simply. "Even though I failed terribly as a mother." Before Emma could respond, Harris arrived with the girls. "Everything okay here?" he asked, glancing between Susan and Emma. "Yes," Emma said, still processing her mother's words. "We were just talking." Susan looked at the twins, who stared back curiously. "They're beautiful, Emma," she said softly. "They have your eyes." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Who was she, Mommy? Emily asked. Emma hesitated. Someone I knew a long time ago, she finally said. Come on, it's lunchtime. On the drive back to the community center, Emma let Harris handle most of the conversation with the girls. She stared out the window, lost in thought. Catherine's memories, Susan's words, the revelations in court, all colliding in her mind. What are you thinking about? Harris asked when they stopped at a red light. Change, Emma answered. How to turn a place full of bad memories into a real home. Harris smiled. If anyone can do that, it's you. Emma nodded, already mentally outlining her next steps. First, a thorough cleaning of the mansion to clear out the dust and open all the windows so fresh air could flow. Next, selecting new furniture, nothing ostentatious, just enough to make it cozy. The girls would need their own room, maybe the old third-floor playroom with the beautiful view of the gardens, and the library would be preserved with its old books and comfy chairs. The music studio would need a new piano for Sophie and Emily to learn, just like Emma had with her grandmother. As for herself, Emma thought of converting Catherine's office into her own workspace. There, surrounded by memories of the one relative who truly cared about her, she could manage the estate and prove to everyone, and mostly to herself, that she was capable. You're smiling, Harris observed. Emma hadn't realized. I'm imagining the possibilities, she said. For the first time in years, I'm thinking about the future beyond the next place to sleep or the next meal. How does it feel? Emma looked at her daughters, singing happily in the back seat, and felt a certainty growing inside her. Determined, she replied. Catherine believed in me. She said I was different from the others. Now I have to prove she was right. I'm sure you will, Harris said with an encouraging smile. Back at the community center, while the girls ate lunch, Emma found a quiet corner and began writing on a scrap of paper, a list of tasks, decisions, and hires to be made. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a symbol of rejection and coldness, but a chance to start fresh. We'll transform it, Grandma, she murmured to herself. We'll make it a true home, just like you always wanted. Emma sensed Catherine smiling somewhere, pleased to see her granddaughter finally finding her place in the world. The county courthouse was packed that crisp fall morning. After months of legal battles, the final decision day had arrived. Emma smoothed out the simple thrift store dress she wore and took a deep breath, trying to control her nerves. Sophie and Emily, dressed in their nicest outfits, clung to her hands. Throughout the process, they had adapted surprisingly well to the routine of hearings and endless waits, fascinated by the little school where they stayed while grown-ups discussed matters they didn't understand. Are you okay, Mommy? Sophie whispered, noticing the tension on her mother's face. Yes, sweetheart, Emma replied, forcing a smile. Harris was already waiting by the entrance, as punctual as ever. His normally impassive face showed discreet confidence. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. On the other side of the courtroom, the Whitmore family settled into the front row, Susan, Richard, and Elaine, all impeccably dressed as if attending a high-profile photo session. Susan gave Emma a brief look, her face a neutral mask impossible to read. All rise for the Honorable Judge Caldwell. The room hushed as the judge entered and took his seat. A man of few words, Caldwell was known for unyielding fairness. We're here for the final ruling in Whitmore versus Carter, he announced, adjusting his glasses. After extensive review of all submitted evidence, this court is ready to issue a final decision. Emma felt her heart race. Her entire life, and more importantly, her daughter's future, hung on this man's words. Regarding the challenge to Catherine Whitmore's will, this court determines that the testator was fully competent when she made the changes. The medical reports are conclusive, and allegations of manipulation find no factual basis in the records. A murmur spread across the courtroom. Harris remained still, but Emma noticed him tighten his grip on his folder slightly. As for the validity of the mansion's sale, continued the judge, this court finds that the transaction is null, pursuant to the explicit clause in the will. The submitted document bearing Ms. Carter's supposed signature was proven fraudulent. Emma saw Richard grow pale, while the family's lawyer whispered something urgently to him. Finally, regarding Ms. Carter's capacity to manage the inherited estate, after reviewing her management plan, and the progress reports filed over these months, this court sees no legal impediment to her taking full control of her inheritance. Therefore, it is the decision of this court that Emma Carter is the legitimate owner of Whitmore Mansion and beneficiary of 1/3 of Catherine Whitmore's estate, as outlined in her will. Case closed. The gavel struck echoing like thunder. For a moment, Emma stood frozen. She had won. She had truly won. "Congratulations," said Harris, allowing himself a rare smile. "You're officially a wealthy woman, Ms. Carter." The courtroom split in its reactions. On one side, quiet applause from community center friends who had come to support her. On the other, stunned faces on the Whitmore side. Richard was the first to react, standing abruptly and leaving without looking back. Elaine followed him hurriedly, casting Emma a resentful glare. Only Susan remained seated, staring at nothing. When she finally stood, Emma clearly saw her expression, not anger or outrage, but something more complicated, almost defeated. For a brief second, their eyes met. Susan opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it, shaking her head slightly before walking away. That expression etched itself in Emma's mind. It wasn't the arrogant look of the woman who had kicked her out 15 years ago. It was the look of someone broken inside. "You okay?" Harris asked, noticing her distraction. "Yes," Emma replied, pushing the thoughts away. "Just processing." The Whitmore mansion looked even more impressive that sunny afternoon when Harris's car stopped at the iron gates. "The keys, please," the lawyer said, handing Emma a heavy key ring. "Front gate, front door, back door, and this small one is to your grandmother's private office on the 3rd floor. She specified only you should have access to it." Emma took the keys with a surreal feeling. So many times she'd passed through these gates, as a child, holding her mother's hand, as a rebellious teen, sneaking in late, and as a young adult, kicked out with only a backpack. Now she was returning as the owner. Harris entered the code, and the gates opened slowly. As the car rolled down the circular drive, Sophie and Emily pressed their faces to the windows in awe. "Is it really ours, Mommy?" Sophie asked, excitement spilling from her voice. "Yes, sweetheart." "It's huge," Emily exclaimed, dragging the word out as her eyes widened. The car stopped in front of the main entrance. For a moment, no one moved. "Shall we do the honors?" Harris asked, indicating the door. Emma hesitated, then held out the keys to her daughters. "Together," she said. Sophie and Emily practically leaped from the car and ran to the front door. With Emma's help, they managed to unlock it. The entrance hall was still empty, as before, but something felt different this time. Maybe it was the sunlight streaming in, or simply knowing the house was truly theirs now. "Let's explore," Emily shouted, already darting toward the grand staircase. "Easy, princess," Emma called after her. "We have all the time in the world now." Harris stayed behind to give them space, eventually bidding them farewell. Emma found herself alone with her daughters in the giant vacant mansion. The twins ran from room to room, their giggles echoing against the bare walls, a sound absent for far too long. While the girls explored the second-floor bedrooms, Emma headed to the 3rd floor. Catherine's office was at the end of the hall. Unlike the rest of the house, this door was locked. Emma inserted the smaller key, her hands trembling slightly. To her surprise, the room remained furnished. The antique dark wood desk was there, along with the reading chair and the shelves. On top of the desk lay a carved wooden box with Emma's name engraved on the lid. Next to it, an envelope in Catherine's familiar handwriting. With shaking fingers, Emma opened the envelope. "My dear Emma, if you're reading this, it means you've finally received what is rightfully yours. I know the road was not easy. Our family never makes things easy, as you well know. Inside this box are your memories. Drawings you made as a child, letters you wrote, photographs I saved over the years. They are fragments of the wonderful girl you were and the extraordinary woman I knew you would become. Forgive me for not doing more while I was alive. The truth is, I was weaker than I seemed, more inclined to keep up appearances than to fight for what was right. You, on the other hand, always had the courage I lacked. This house is now yours to transform as you wish. I hope you fill it with the love and life that have been missing from these walls for so long, with eternal love Grandma Catherine Emma wiped away silent tears. She opened the box to find exactly what the note described, treasures from her childhood lovingly preserved. At the bottom lay something else, a pair of pearl earrings Catherine had worn on special occasions. "Mommy! Come see what we found." Sophie's voice pulled her back to the present. Stowing the letter in her pocket, Emma headed downstairs. The girls had discovered a forgotten chest containing old toys that escaped the family's purge. "Look at this doll, Mommy," Emily said, holding up a porcelain doll in a yellowed dress. "Was it yours?" "Yes," Emma said, recognizing her childhood friend. "Her name was Eliza. Can we keep her?" "Of course you can." While the twins excitedly rummaged through the chest, Emma glanced out the window. The garden, once immaculate, was overgrown with tall grass, with the rose bushes Catherine loved struggling to survive among the weeds. Despite the legal victory, despite finally having a real roof, Emma felt an unexpected emptiness. Being here, surrounded by the mansion's cold grandeur, dragged her back to memories of rejection, silent meals, sharp criticisms, and the constant feeling of never measuring up. "Mommy, can we sleep here tonight?" Sophie asked eagerly. "Please. We don't have beds yet, sweetie, or food in the kitchen." "But it's our house," Emily insisted. "We can bring our mattresses from the shelter." Emma looked at their hopeful faces. For them, the mansion didn't carry painful baggage. It was a fairy tale castle of possibilities. "You know what? Let's camp in the living room tonight." "How about that?" The girls' eyes sparkled at the idea. Hours later, as the sun set, Emma watched her daughters sleeping in their makeshift sleeping bags in the middle of the empty living room. They had used what little they owned and a few basic items purchased quickly to create their first camp in their new home. She couldn't shake the image of her mother's defeated look at the courthouse. A small stab of guilt surfaced, not for fighting for the inheritance, but for the seemingly irreversible family rift. But as she looked at her peacefully sleeping daughters, Emma pushed those thoughts aside. There was no room for guilt in this new beginning. Susan and the others had made their choices long ago, and now they had to live with the consequences. The mansion was empty, cavernous, and haunted by ghosts, but also full of potential. The twins' laughter had already begun to break the oppressive silence, bringing life to the bare rooms. Tomorrow they would begin filling the space. They'd buy beds, a kitchen table, maybe a couch. Nothing fancy. Emma didn't want to recreate the chilly opulence she had known growing up. She wanted warmth, a genuine home. Sophie stirred in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Emily, as always, slept deeply, clutching the newly found doll. Emma lay down between them, listening to the house's sounds, the creaking of old wood, the wind rustling the garden trees, the distant city hum. The mansion was officially hers now. The legal fight was won. But Emma knew the real challenge lay ahead, turning this emblem of her painful past into a foundation for the future her daughters deserved. 3 weeks had passed since Emma and the girls moved into the mansion. The massive, empty house was slowly coming to life. Simple but comfortable furniture now filled the main rooms. The twins had chosen the old playroom as their bedroom, thrilled by the view over the freshly trimmed gardens. On that rainy Sunday afternoon, Emma was sorting through old photos in Catherine's office when the doorbell startled her. She wasn't expecting visitors. The twins were upstairs playing, unaware of the interruption. Through the frosted glass, she saw the silhouette of a woman. When she finally opened the door, her body tensed unconsciously. Susan Whitmore stood in the drizzle, no umbrella. Her previously impeccable hair was damp and askew, and her makeup was slightly smudged around her eyes. She wore clothes that were plain by her standards, dark pants and a navy sweater. "What do you want?" Emma asked, not stepping aside to let her in. Susan didn't reply immediately. She took a moment to look at her daughter's face, as if trying to memorize every detail. "May I come in, please?" she finally asked, her voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "I promise I won't take much of your time." Emma hesitated, but opened the door a bit wider. Susan stepped into the hall. "I like what you did with the entryway," she said, noticing the colorful rug and a simple bench. "It's welcoming." "I'm not here for your approval on decor," Emma replied, folding her arms. "Why are you here?" Susan took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. I came to ask for forgiveness. Those words, so direct and simple, caught Emma off guard. In all the scenarios she'd imagined for a possible meeting, this had never been one of them. Forgiveness, Emma echoed, the word sounding odd on her tongue. I know I don't deserve it, Susan went on, her voice trembling. What I did, what I allowed to happen, is unforgivable. But I can't keep living without at least trying. To Emma's astonishment, real tears started rolling down Susan's cheeks. Emma had only seen her mother cry twice in her entire life. Why now? Emma asked, still wary. After everything, losing it all, letting me live on the streets for years with 2 kids, the lawsuit, why does the regret only appear now? Susan wiped her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so unlike her, it felt almost surreal. Because I finally faced the truth I've been avoiding for decades, she replied. Losing this case wasn't just losing money, it was losing the last chance to keep up appearances. It forced me to look in the mirror and see who I really am. Noise on the stairs made them both look up. Sophie and Emily were coming down, curious about the unfamiliar voice. Who is it, Mommy? Sophie asked, stopping when she saw the stranger. Girls, go back upstairs, please, Emma asked. I'll bring your snack soon. But who is she? Emily insisted, always the more direct twin. I'm Susan, her mother introduced herself in a gentle voice Emma barely recognized. A friend of your Grandma Catherine. Satisfied with the explanation, the twins returned to their room. Let's go to the kitchen, Emma decided. Walls have ears in this house, they always have. Susan followed quietly to the kitchen, the only room Emma had fully renovated. There's something you need to know, Susan began, looking at her hands. Something I did. Something we did. That's worse than you realize. Emma braced herself, tense. Catherine never stopped looking for you, Susan revealed at last. From the moment you walked out. What? Emma felt like the air had been knocked from her lungs. She hired detectives, searched everywhere, asked about you in every shelter in the city, Susan explained, her voice quavering. But Richard, Elaine, and I, we intercepted everything. We fired detectives, paid people to give false information. We told her you explicitly wanted no contact with the family. You lied to her all those years. Susan nodded, unable to meet Emma's gaze. At first it was hurt pride. Then, when she started talking about changing the will in your favor, it became about money. My God, Emma whispered, leaning on the counter. While I was sleeping on the pavement with 2 little kids, you were actively blocking my only chance at help. Susan opened her purse and took out a yellowed envelope. Catherine didn't just look for you. She set up a bank account in your name. Every month for 15 years she made a deposit. When she found out about the twins, she increased it. So where was that money? I never saw a penny. Richard had power of attorney for Catherine's finances. He has diverted the funds, forged documents to show you were receiving the money regularly. Emma opened the envelope to find bank statements, deposit records, and copies of over 30 letters written by Catherine, all addressed to Emma, none ever delivered. How did you get these? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard kept them in his safe. When we lost the case, he wanted to destroy them, but I couldn't let that happen. Emma flipped through the letters, recognizing her grandmother's elegant script. She caught fragments of sentences. I miss you so much. I hope you're well. Please forgive me. How much? Emma asked, voice now steady. How much money was in that account? Altogether, over $1 million. The revelation hit like a physical blow. $1 million could have given her daughters a normal childhood, a safe home, food, schooling. Instead, they'd survived off scraps and slept under stairs. You're going to jail for this, Emma said. It's fraud. Probably, Susan agreed, a surprising calm in her voice. I've already consulted a lawyer. I'm ready for the consequences. The phone rang. Emma answered automatically, still reeling from all she'd learned. Emma, it's Harris. I need to talk to you urgently. I found something at Catherine's old law firm you need to see. I'm a bit busy right now, she said, eyeing Susan. It's about a trust fund, Harris persisted. Catherine set up a separate fund for you and the girls that nobody knew about. It was hidden under a code, off the main records. I just confirmed with the bank. There's almost $4 million in it, completely unknown to anyone but her." Emma closed her eyes, overwhelmed. "I'll be there in an hour," she managed, before hanging up. Turning back, she found Susan watching her with an expression she'd never seen: regret, resignation, and possibly pride. "That was Harris?" Susan asked. Emma nodded, still struggling to process. "There's more, isn't there?" Susan guessed. "Catherine was always smarter than all of us. She must have found a way to protect you that even Richard couldn't sabotage. Why are you telling me all this now?" Emma asked. "Why hand yourself over like this?" Susan looked out the window, toward the garden that was slowly regaining some of its old beauty. "When I saw you in court, with your daughters, fighting us all alone yet with a dignity I never possessed, something in me finally broke," she admitted, raw honesty in her tone. "I realized I threw away the only thing of real value I ever had, my daughter, in pursuit of things that, in the end, mean nothing." Emma sat down, physically and emotionally drained. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said honestly. "I don't even know if I want to." "I understand," Susan replied. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, just offering you the truth you deserve. And," she hesitated, "if one day, in any way, you'd consider letting me meet my granddaughters, it would be more than I deserve." Footsteps signaled the twins' approach. Emma glanced at her mother, then at the letters she'd never received, at the proof of stolen money. "Mommy, we're hungry," Emily announced, entering the kitchen. She froze at the visitor. "Oh, hi again, Susan." Sophie appeared behind her, more reserved, half hiding behind her sister. A tense silence filled the room. Emma knew she was at a crossroads. She could send her mother away and move on, or she could choose something far more difficult. "Girls," she said at last, her voice faltering slightly. "This is Susan Whitmore. She's your grandmother." The twins' eyes went wide. Susan seemed paralyzed, obviously not expecting this opening. "We have a grandma?" Sophie asked, astonished. "Like Grandma Catherine?" "Yes," Emma said, "and she came to visit us today." "Did you go to heaven and come back?" Emily asked, in that childlike logic, causing Susan to let out a tearful laugh. "No, sweetie," Susan replied. I've been away too long, far too long." Emma took a deep breath, still unsure whether she was doing the right thing. "Susan will stay for a snack," she announced, surprising even herself. "And maybe we can talk more afterward." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But it was a door left ajar, a possibility once deemed unthinkable. As she prepared sandwiches for the girls, watching them pepper Susan with questions, Emma thought of the long road that had led her here, from cold nights under library steps to reclaiming the mansion, from total rejection to discovering she had always been loved by her grandmother from afar. Harris's phone call still rang in her ears. More money, more security for the girls. But she finally understood that Catherine's true legacy wasn't the mansion or the millions. It was the chance to break the cycle, to rebuild what had been shattered, to forge a new kind of family, one based not on appearances, but on choices and second chances. The days following Susan's visit were an emotional whirlwind for Emma. Discovering the diverted money and intercepted letters reopened barely healing wounds. On the other hand, the trust fund uncovered by Harris guaranteed a secure future for her daughters, something Emma never dared dream of during her years on the streets. One quiet afternoon, while Sophie and Emily were at a trial day at the private school they would soon attend, Emma decided to explore one of the last corners of the mansion she had yet to really examine, Catherine's old bedroom. Until now, only the private office had drawn her attention, but something compelled her to see the place where her grandmother had spent her final years. The bedroom retained the discreet elegance that defined Catherine. Unlike most of the house, it had been left relatively untouched by the family's attempts to sell everything. Maybe it was out of posthumous respect, or maybe just an oversight. Emma moved slowly through the room, allowing the memories to resurface. A faint smell of lavender lingered, as if Catherine had just stepped out. Some paintings still hung on the walls, not the most valuable ones that had surely gone to auction, but those of purely sentimental value. She sat on the armchair by the window, imagining her grandmother sitting there, gazing out at the garden she loved, perhaps thinking of her lost granddaughter. The idea that Catherine had never given up on her, even when everyone else did, comforted and pained her at the same time. On the antique dressing table, Emma found a silver hairbrush, a few nearly empty perfume bottles, and a drawer that seemed stuck when she tried to open it. Carefully, she tugged until it gave way. Inside was an envelope, different from the one Susan had brought. This one was sealed, with Emma's name handwritten on the front. A date in the corner indicated just 3 months before Catherine's death. Heart pounding, Emma opened it and unfolded the letter. My dear Emma, if this letter reaches you, it means my suspicions were correct. For years I have tried to find you without success. Recently I started to doubt the increasingly evasive explanations from Susan and Richard regarding your whereabouts. I hired a new investigator, this time without my family's knowledge. If all goes as planned, he will find you, and this letter will be delivered alongside the funds I set aside for you. But if something goes wrong, if this letter is found after I'm gone, I hope you understand I never forgot you, never stopped loving you, never accepted how you were treated. Emma, you were always different from the other Whitmores. Even as a child, you showed a compassion and integrity rarely seen in our family. When you left, you took the last bit of light remaining in this house. Whatever has happened in your life since then, I hope you stayed true to who you are, even in the toughest of circumstances. The real inheritance I leave you isn't the material assets, though they may help ease practical burdens. The true inheritance lies in the values I hope to pass on during our moments together: honesty, compassion, and the courage to forge your own path. One final lesson, perhaps the hardest. Forgiveness isn't something you give to others. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. It doesn't mean forgetting or approving of the wrongs done, but freeing yourself from the weight of carrying that pain. Whatever path you choose from here on, my love goes with you. Forever yours, Grandma Catherine. Tears streamed down Emma's cheeks as she read and reread the letter. Her grandmother's last words seemed to answer the very questions haunting her. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. The phrase echoed in her mind, challenging her to think about what she truly wanted for her future. Holding on to anger, no matter how justified, meant remaining captive to the past she fought so hard to escape. Emma carefully folded the letter and left the bedroom. The mansion, once a symbol of everything lost, was shifting into something else, a place of possibilities, a place to rebuild her life on her own terms. 2 weeks later, Emma stood on the back terrace, watching Harris and the landscaper discuss restoring the rose garden. The twins had visited their new school and were enchanted by the library and music room, 2 luxuries they'd never known during their time on the streets. I think she'd like this restoration, Harris said, joining Emma after the landscaper walked away. Catherine loved these roses. Yes, Emma agreed. I remember her showing me how to distinguish the varieties. Tea roses, damask roses, floribundas. She used to say each had its own personality. Harris smiled, pleased to see Emma more relaxed. How are you coping with everything? He asked in a rare, personal moment. Emma sighed, gazing out at the horizon. One day at a time. The document Susan brought and the letter I found helped clarify some things. Are you going to press charges against your family for diverting the money? Harris asked, ever practical. I haven't decided. Part of me wants justice, wants them to pay for every night we spent in the cold and every meal we missed. She paused, collecting her thoughts. But another part of me thinks about my daughters and how a long, bitter legal battle would affect our lives now that we finally have stability. Harris nodded in understanding. And about Susan. She's been calling my office, asking if she can visit her granddaughters. Emma didn't answer immediately. Her mother, once so intimidating, now seemed more complicated, fractured by regrets Emma never considered possible. I think I'll allow supervised visits, she finally said. Not for her, but for the girls. They deserve to know their grandmother and form their own opinions. That's a generous decision, Harris observed. It's not generosity, Emma corrected. It's practicality. trying to salvage something from the ruins, to create something better than what I had. That evening, after putting the twins to bed in their freshly decorated room, a mix of simple furniture and small touches reflecting their emerging personalities, Emma called Susan. The conversation was short, businesslike. She set clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Susan could visit on Sundays for a few hours, no expensive gifts or extravagant promises. If a relationship was to develop, it would be slow and rooted in trust and mutual respect. "I understand completely," Susan replied, her voice subdued but hopeful. "It will be on your terms, Emma." "Always. One last thing," Emma said before hanging up. "I'm not doing this for you or me. I'm doing it for the girls because they deserve better than the cycle of hurt that brought us here." "It's more than I deserve," Susan answered softly. Susan's first visit came on a mild Sunday. Emma greeted her formally, watching as her mother seemed smaller, more fragile, without the armor of jewelry and expensive clothes. "I brought something for the girls," Susan said, offering a package wrapped in simple paper. "It's nothing costly, I promise." Emma accepted it and opened it, finding 2 carefully assembled photo albums. "They're pictures of you," Susan explained nervously. "From when you were a child, I thought the girls might like to see what you looked like at their age. And maybe you'd like these memories too." Emma flipped through the album, surprised at photos she never knew existed. Her at 3, holding her father's hand on a beach. At 5, dressed for her first ballet class. At 8, proudly holding up a drawing for the camera. "You kept all these pictures?" "Everyone," Susan confirmed. Even after you left, I couldn't part with anything that reminded me of you." It was a small gesture, but profound. Susan wasn't trying to buy her way back with expensive trinkets. She was offering something of genuine value, pieces of the past Emma had lost. The meeting went better than Emma expected. The twins, with natural curiosity, bombarded their newly discovered grandmother with questions about everything from her house to her favorite foods. Susan answered with a patience Emma had never seen growing up. As Sundays passed, a pattern formed. Susan arrived punctually, always with a small but meaningful offering, a book, an old family photo, or a recipe the girls wanted to try. Never flashy, never crossing the lines Emma set. "She's different with them," Emma remarked to Harris during one of their weekly financial check-ins. "Not the same person who raised me. People change," he said pragmatically. "Sometimes they have to lose everything to realize what really matters." On a particularly lovely spring afternoon, nearly 6 months after Susan's first visit, Emma watched from a distance as her mother taught the twins to plant tulip bulbs in the newly restored section of the garden. The girls, equipped with little gardening shovels, followed instructions carefully, giggling whenever they got their hands dirty. It was a scene Emma never imagined she'd witness. Her mother, once so immaculate, kneeling in the dirt, sleeves rolled up, teaching her granddaughters with boundless patience. The rigid, icy woman from Emma's childhood appeared to have been replaced by someone else entirely. Or maybe, Emma mused, this had always been Susan's true self, buried beneath social expectations, an unhappy marriage, and distorted values. As she reflected, Emma realized something else had changed inside her too. The constant knot of anger and hurt she'd carried for so long wasn't as tight now. It hadn't vanished. Some wounds are too deep for complete healing, but it no longer defined her thoughts or her identity. Richard and Elaine had attempted to contest the newly discovered trust fund, but to no avail. The paperwork was airtight, and Catherine's clear intention to protect Emma and her granddaughters was indisputable. Eventually, they gave up the legal fight, keeping their distance and resentment. Emma chose not to press charges over the diverted money, not out of unconditional forgiveness, but a conscious decision not to prolong the cycle of conflict. The reclaimed funds and the trust already provided more than she ever dreamed for her daughters. Chasing the past would cost time and energy she preferred to invest in the future. The twins now attended an excellent school, astonishing teachers with their quick learning and natural curiosity. Life on the streets had taught them resilience and adaptability, uncommon in children their age. The mansion was changing too. Emma sold some antiques that lacked sentimental value, using the proceeds to renovate the house according to her vision. She hired a young architect who perfectly understood the goal: preserve the house's elegance but make it warmer, less formal. The main hall, once dominated by heavy, dark furniture, now featured accessible bookshelves, comfy sofas, and an area for games and play. The old formal dining room had become an art studio where the girls could be creative without worrying about messes or stains. Emma also started thinking about her own future. Financial security allowed her to dream again. She enrolled in college courses she'd always longed to take: art history, literature, psychology, areas that had fascinated her but were out of reach when she was scraping by. More surprisingly, she accepted an invitation to join the board of a non-profit that helped homeless women and children. Her personal experience, combined with her newfound resources, gave her a unique opportunity to make a genuine difference for those facing the same challenges she'd once endured. "Grandma Susan said we can visit her house next week," Sophie announced one afternoon, running toward Emma with dirt-covered hands. "Can we, Mommy?" Emma hesitated. Until now, all visits had occurred at the mansion, neutral ground. Going to Susan's place would be another level of trust, another step on the path to forgiveness. "She has a shell collection from her travels," Emily chimed in, fascinated by anything collectible. "She said we can help organize them." Emma looked at her daughter's eager, hopeful faces, then at Susan, who stood at a distance, deliberately not interfering, giving Emma space to decide. "We'll talk about it this week," she finally said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was space for possibilities, for moving forward at a pace she could handle. That night, after the girls were asleep, Emma sipped tea on the porch, gazing at the stars. She thought about Catherine and wished her grandmother could see the mansion's transformation, meet Sophie and Emily, witness this unlikely reconciliation taking shape. In a way, she felt Catherine already knew. The words of her last letter had become Emma's guiding compass. "The true inheritance lies in the values I hope to pass on: honesty, compassion, and the courage to forge your own path." The path she'd chosen wasn't the easiest. Allowing Susan into her life demanded constant vigilance, clear boundaries, and tough honesty. Forgiveness didn't mean erasing the past or pretending those wounds didn't exist. It meant refusing to be defined by them, not letting bitterness dictate her choices. At the following morning, a bright Saturday, Emma took the twins for a picnic on the far side of the garden, near a small artificial lake Catherine had built decades ago. Recently restored, it now held ducks and colorful fish that delighted the girls. "Careful not to fall in," Emma warned, settling on the blanket spread on the grass. The girls nodded absent-mindedly, already engrossed in tossing small bread pieces to the ducks. Their laughter echoed across the garden, filling a space once reserved for stiff social gatherings. Emma took a deep breath, soaking in the sunshine on her face, the scent of newly planted flowers, and the gentle breeze stirring the century-old trees. The sensation that filled her was almost unsettling in its novelty: peace. Not the false peace of denial or a temporary reprieve from trouble, but something deeper, more substantial. The peace of someone who has finally found her place in the world, not by accident of birth or circumstance, but by a deliberate choice. The Whitmore mansion, for so long a symbol of what she had lost, was now just a setting, a physical structure for something new she was building. The real home wasn't in the walls or the gardens, however grand they might be. It was in her daughter's laughter, in the slowly rebuilt trust, in the endless possibilities opening up each day. Sophie ran over, cupping something in her hands. "Look, Mommy, a butterfly got hurt." Emma examined the tiny creature, its blue wings slightly torn. "Can we take care of it?" Emily asked, joining her sister. "Of course," Emma said. "We'll take it home and make a little shelter until it's better." The girls beamed, eager for their mission to protect the fragile insect. Emma watched them chatter about the perfect place to keep the butterfly, how to feed it, when it might be well enough to set free. This is what Catherine meant, Emma thought. The true inheritance wasn't money or property. It was found in moments of genuine compassion, in seeing beauty in broken things, in the courage to start over when all seemed lost. As the twins ran back to the house, excited to prepare a refuge for their injured friend, Emma lingered in the garden. She closed her eyes, breathed in deeply, and smiled. Her real home wasn't the mansion. It was the new life she had chosen to create. It was the family she was forming, not through blood alone, but through conscious acts of love and care. It was the peace born not from the absence of struggle, but from the assurance that no matter the challenges, she had finally found her path. A path that was imperfect, sometimes difficult, often unexpected, but unquestionably her own. And on that path, Emma Carter would bloom, like a rose surviving frost and storms, opening her petals to the sun,